This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, Bruchim Haba, welcome everyone. We continue in Mishna Berura, Daf Hashavua. We are up to Siman Yud, Seif Vav. Siman Yud, Seif Vav. We will possibly have a double header today because it's a short page. Okay, Siman Yud, Seif Vav. Ein Koiflin es Talis umatilam tzitzis al knafel kamay shehi kfula. You should not double a talis, fold a talis, and put tzitzis on its corners in its state of being doubled up. That's what we cited yesterday. Yesterday we discussed two possible cases where you fold up part of a talis, and there we say, okay, that's going to be unfolded, but we do not double up a talis and put tzitzis on its corners in its state of being folded up. You have to put the tzitzis on the four corners as it is simply. Elam kain tfarakula, unless you sewed it up the whole thing. Even if you sewed it on one side. The Yeshayim says Rama, some say the chayavim afilu b'loy tefira, that you would be chayiv to put tzitzis if you fold it up, even if you don't sew it. The toiv lasis la tzitzis, the correct thing would be to put tzitzis, avaloy levarich aleha, but don't make a bracha on this. Says in Mishna Berura Sivkatan Tes Vav. Shehi kefula, when it's doubled over, she'im tipashet, because if it opens up, nimtzua tzitzis be'emtziisa, then the tzitzis will be in the middle of anan tzitzis karabina. We need tzitzis to be on the corner. So the reason you don't make tzitzis on the garment that's folded up is because if it opens up, the tzitzis will be in the middle, and we need tzitzis to be on the corner. But rather, what do? As Rama says, you put the tzitzis on the four corners simply. Says Mishna Berura, if you folded it, if you folded it because this is a beged that's fit for oig melech habashan, it's very, very long. You can't wear it unless you fold it. Some say that the garment is exempt from tzitzis, the ein shem beged olav. It is not considered a garment. Very interesting. You could have a garment that's so long that it's not considered a garment. I mean, this is not Elu Dvarim She'elam Shiur. There's a Shiur. The garment has a Shiur. It has to be human-sized. If it's the size of a dinosaur, then it's pater from tzitzis. Therefore, Umasik Ataza Prima Gadam Diyato by tzitzis Baknafos Hapshutim V'Leivarich. Put tzitzis on its corners simply, but don't make a bracha. Va'afilu meiruach echas. Even on one side, even if you sew it up on one side, ayin bebiur halacha. Look in the biur halacha. Let's take a peek at the biur halacha. Says the biur halacha, elam kein tfara kula va'afilu meiruach echas. Hu lashon harambam. This is the language of the Rambam, even if it's sewed up on one side. Va'ayin bi beis Yosef. Look in the beis Yosef shekasav atam. The Beis Yosef writes, you know what the reason is? Mishum da al yedei zeh tipashed shuv lo yeh tzitzis be'emtziisa. The reason would be is because if the beged is spread out, the tzitzis won't be in the middle because it's sewed up. So what does it mean if it's spread out? How could the garment open up if it's sewed? But again, that's what the Beis Yosef says, that if you open up the beged, the tzitzis won't be in the middle because it's sewed up. And the ayin ba'artzis hachayim, the nishar b'tzorch iyon ala ogor, the kosav b'shem harambam, the matzach tvil l'chol gimel ruchayseh. The Malbim remains with the question on the ogor, who cites the Rambam, who requires stitching on three sides. And the Biur Halacha goes on to defend the Agur from the Kasha of the Malbim. Let us proceed in the Mishna Berura, in the next Mishna Berura, Sif Katan Yurches. T'chayovin. So Sif Katan Yurches is going on the Ramah. The Ramah brought a Yesh Amrim that it's chayiv in even if you don't stitch it. Meaning, let's say you fold it up. The Ramah brings an opinion, the Rif, the Rosh, the Tur, that even if you don't stitch it up, if you fold it up, it's chayiv, and he therefore recommends to put tzitzis on it without making a bracha. What does it mean it's chayiv? Of course it's chayiv, it's 4-corner garment. Chayiv means you're chayiv to put tzitzis on the new corners when it's folded up, even though it's not sewn. Lahato b'kanfei akfulo is to put on the corners of the folded up edges. D'chozman shi mechupeles v'nispashta. Shem talis k'may. So long as it's folded and not opened, it's considered a talis in its state of being folded. So that's the Yesh Omrim. The Yesh Omrim says even if it's folded without being stitched, we look at it a 4-corner garment in its state of it being folded. And therefore you should put on tzitzis and not make a bracha when you put on the tzitzis on the new folds. Says the Mishna Berura, Tamu kol achrayim. The Achronim will ask the following question. This is a gavaldig akash. This is going to start off your day on the right foot. They say, you know what you should do? Put the tzitzis on the corners of the new folded corners, but don't make a bracha. Ask the Achronim, you haven't fixed anything. Because according to the Mechaber, you were chayiv to put tzitzis on the corners of pshutim, of the corners of the garment when it was fully open. So how do you wear this garment? You can't wear the garment. Wear the garment by putting the tzitzis on the corners of the folded garment. Yeah, but that works according to some Rishonim. But other Rishonim say that the original corners are not nisbatel and the tzitzis have to be on the original corners. So how could you wear this garment? Say, I know. I'll put strings on the original corners and on the new corners. So I'll have 6 strings. Everyone agrees that's us. That's about Toisif. Umaske Ladina, the Achroinim conclude, this is the conclusion of the Magen Avram. Don't do that. And that's why I'm pretty proud to say that everyone on our Shiur does not wear folded tzitzis. Good for you. Keep up the good work. Baruch Hashem, El Acher Me'av Esrim Shana, you could go up to Shemayim, you say, Yibbayna Shalaylam. Look at my chumrah, I never wore a folded talis. It's a big Inyan. Don't do this. Elam came to far unless you stitch it. Even if the stitching is not so close knit, it's spaced. If it's sewed, it won't open up. Whether it was a square talis, or if the talis was just too long, put tzitzis on the new folded corners, and you can make a bracha because they're sewed. But stay away from the folded talis. Stay away from it. Okay, and I'm sure that's a practice that you all observe. Okay, let us continue in Sif Vav. The Mechaber continues. Hitil tzitzis al tzitzis. If you placed tzitzis on tzitzis. Im niskavin levatel rishona. If your kavana is to nullify the first tzitzis, choytech harishon kshera, you cut it off and it's kosher. Then niskavin lahoisif, if your kavana was to add, then afal pisha chasach achas mishteim psula. Even though you cut one of the two, it's pasul. Let's see the Mishna Berura of Katan Chaf Harishayna. Efshe dedavka nakat. It could be when the Mechaber says if you put one tassel on another tassel, meaning you're putting 2 tzitzis in the same corners. If you're mechavin to mivata the first one, you could cut the first one. Does it have to be the first one you cut? Says Mishra, could be yeah. If you cut the second one, pasul, because you're mevatel the first one. However, if your kavanah was to add, it's not going to help to cut either of them. Says Rama, v'yesh machshirin, there are those who are machshir b'chol inyan, v'chein ikar. So even if your kavanah was to be mevatel, or your kavanah was lahaisif, if you cut the first one or you cut the second one, it's kosher. The koydem shechasach harishaynos, before you cut the first one, possible b'chol inyan, it's possible because you have two tassels coming out of the hole. Says the Mishna Berura, v'chein ikar, v'chein pasku, sivkat nechaf aleph b'chol inyan. Hainu bein sheniskam levatel, whether your kavanah was to be mevatel the first one, or niskam lehoisef, or your kavanah was to add, uvein shechatach harishaynos, oyashniyos, it's gonna be kosher. At the time you put on the second tzitzis, you're about toisif, so the talis is puzzle. So how is it going to help to cut one of them off? Which one are you going to cut off? When you put on the second one, you passel the talis. It's not going to help to cut off the first one. How can you cut off the first one? The second one, you didn't do a shinoi ma'isa. It's possible because of tasav loy mina asoi. So the Shulchan Harav says, since there's an isser about toisif to put on the second one, the placing it is not considered significant. It's like you did nothing. So when you cut off the first one, it's like now you put on the second one. Says the Mishna Berura, v'chein ikar, v'chein pasku achreinim, harishaynos, the first one, nakad harishaynos, it dafka, it says before you cut the first one, it's pasal b'chol inyan. Nakad harishaynos, dekai amash kazav shulchanach metchila, choytech harishaynach. The Mechaber said that if you put one tassel on another, if you're mechavin to mevatel the first one, you cut off the first one. So the Ramah says, before you cut off that first one, it's patzel. But according to the Rush that we paskin like him, certainly if you cut the second one, it's also kosher. Kosher kein dem chasach hashniya is kosher. Kamay de isa bebeis Seif. Okay, so that is today's. If you bear with me, we're going to do one more small segment to finish this page, just so that we could stay with the program in the following week.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.